It's the Ruben Jay Show, and I am super excited to be chatting with this gentleman right here again. Eric, it's been too long. Eric Bischoff is joining me. He is a former professional wrestling executive. He's a professional wrestling podcaster now. He's a former television executive, the best head of hair in professional wrestling, uh, as well as an author of 2 books, one coming out in just a couple of weeks, which is what we're here to talk about. Eric, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Ruben. Good to be with you, man.
Yeah, let's jump into this, man. And obviously, last time we talked, you were doing the podcast. You were fresh in the podcast business. Now I think you're on like your 4th or 5th year now doing the podcast. Is that correct?
Yeah, something like that. I think it's. Yeah, I don't even know. I can't keep track anymore.
Well, that means you're having fun. And I'm just curious, like this podcast has obviously done quite a few different things for you over the last couple of years, giving you the opportunity to connect with wrestling fans and reconnect with wrestling in general. How do you feel now that you're a couple of years into this? How do you feel about the podcast business?
Wow. Well, I'm grateful to be in it. Number one, I think I was fortunate to go into business with Conrad Thompson. Conrad is a brilliant, brilliant guy, and really figured out the podcast business, particularly within the wrestling world. And I'm just lucky to be on that ride, man. It's been going well financially. It's very successful. It's fun. I enjoy doing it. I get to do it from home, so I don't have to travel, which is really nice. And it's opened up a lot of other opportunities. So it's been great.
Yeah, and one of the big opportunities that happened to you, which I believe you're going to be writing about in your book, I'm assuming so. I'm not really sure. I haven't had the chance to read it just yet. I did order it on the first day it went on for sale.
Nice. Thank you.
It was the easiest book buy I've ever done in my life. Was your book Grateful? But you worked for a little while with the WWE, and then you've done some stuff with AEW. I have to ask the question. It's an obligatory question. Will we be seeing, all Eric wrestling coming up soon, or Eric Bischoff leading any sort of wrestling promotion or anything like that?
No, you will not see that. You will not see that. That train done left the station, brother, and it left without me, and I'm glad. I'm grateful for that too. I jokingly say that, but I mean it. I'm so grateful for the career that I've had, and especially now, it's one of the reasons I wrote the book. Really is the podcast has helped me kind of reflect a little differently on my career. It was a tumultuous career. It had extremely high highs and extremely low lows, and sometimes you need a kick in the ass to remember that the high of the highs was a pretty good journey. And you tend to forget about the low of the lows. And that's kind of where I'm at now, man. I just look back and it's all been a great thing. And I'm grateful for it. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I wouldn't want to do it again. It's that time in my life, that season of my life is in the rearview mirror. And I'm happy about it.
My curiosity just perked up a little bit right now because, I would assume, this is just me talking out of the side of my mouth, I don't have any inside information, but I would assume going back into the rat race for a couple of months with WWE may or may not have got the taste out of your mouth of wanting to go back into professional wrestling. Is that something that you would attest to at all? Or maybe the opposite, maybe gave you a fire to maybe get back into it, but then decided not to?
No, I don't think either is true. I went to WWE for the money, number one. I mean, it was a great opportunity, and it was a great opportunity to work at a different level in WWE and work with different people, which I was really looking forward to. I was looking forward to working closely with Vince. And most of all, I was really looking forward to working closely with Bruce Pritchard. That was my primary reason for going. It wasn't the money or anything else. It was really Bruce. And I really believed, because Bruce and I had worked together in the past, and I really believe that our personalities, our views of wrestling are different enough, but our ability to collaborate and kind of find the best in both of our perspectives was really kind of fun. And I was really looking forward to that. And I was curious about, working with Paul Heyman. I've worked around Paul Heyman. I've worked in the same company as Paul Heyman. But we never really got to collaborate, and I was looking forward to that as well. But look, it just didn't work out, man. The chemistry just wasn't there, and it was a great experience. I'm glad I did it, but I think what I learned more than anything out of that experience was that I love where I live and I love my lifestyle. And I'm at a point in my life where I don't easily give that up. And I thought I could. I thought I could adapt much better because I've always been very adaptable throughout my career. It's probably one of the reasons I survived in the entertainment business as long as I did, is because I was adaptable. But when it came to adapting to my lifestyle, going from living on, you know, 20 acres in Wyoming, looking up the river or looking up the reservoir into Yellowstone National Park, and then trading all that to live in a 2-bedroom corporate apartment in downtown Stanford was a little bit more of a jolt on my psyche than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I know. So I've, full disclosure, I've done some work with your wife as well. And she was my life coach for a little while, gave me some sessions. So, it's funny knowing you the little bit that I know you, and knowing her a little bit that I know her. Looking back on it, to me, it's like, wow, I don't see how that would have worked, because yeah, you guys are both kind of free spirits, and when you guys want to jump on a plane, you'll jump on a plane wherever you guys want to go. Or I know you're more fond on driving than flying these days, but it just seemed like a really odd fit at the time. But I would be lying to you if I said I wasn't excited to see Eric Bischoff back in WWE and Paul Heyman back in WWE in the capacities that you guys were in. So,
Well, and I think, part of it was, Ruben, and I want to be careful how I say this so I don't give the wrong impression. WWE was undergoing a lot of internal change and kind of reevaluation. Reimagining was the word I heard a lot. They were reimagining everything within WWE. And companies do that from time to time. You just need to do an internal audit, have somebody from the outside come in and look at your processes and look at the way you do things and suggest perhaps better ways of doing them. That's nothing unusual. But that's what was going on at the time that the executive director positions were created, because they didn't exist before. So you have these two new positions, Paul, executive director of Raw, I'm executive director of SmackDown. But those roles, while they were defined on paper, they were defined so broadly that, anything that had anything to do with SmackDown was under my purview, right? I had to be responsible for it. But you weren't really responsible for anything, right? You couldn't really affect a lot of change because everything had to kind of work its way up to the top, and Vince McMahon was basically calling all the shots. So while they had these two new positions and theoretically a new process in place, the truth is that new process never really was executed upon, which, was obvious in my part within 4 months. Paul Heyman lasted a couple months longer than I did, or whatever it was, 6 months longer than I did. And effectively, neither one of those positions really exist. So look, it was just timing. Again, I was grateful for it, man. I got to work with Vince pretty closely for a period of about 4 months, got to know him a lot differently, and met a lot of other people, and worked with some really, really talented writers, and became friends with them. So nothing bad happened. It was all good.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about your book, because I remember you and I a few years back, we sat at a bar in out here in LA, and I asked you, hey, do you plan on writing another book? And at the time, I don't think they could have paid you enough money to write another book. I don't think you were interested in it. I don't think, I believe what you said was, you said what you needed to say, and there's really not much more to say from that. Here we are now, a handful of years later. You got a book coming out, and is it November 11th?
Yeah, 11/11.
11/11.
Pre-orders stop October 31st. So still time. Get your autographed copy if you pre-order now, bischoffbook.com.
Bischoffbook.com. And it's an incredible concept, but you have a book coming out now. Why, and it's with Guy Evans, who wrote the Nitro book, which is a gigantic piece of literature that I've only gotten about halfway through, and I've owned the book since it came out.
It's a dense book. It's a lot of information.
It is a difficult read to actually get the knowledge. If you just want to read it, yeah, you probably do it in a couple of weeks. But if you actually want to understand the knowledge, it's a lot in there. So what made now the right time to put out this book, and what encouraged you to decide to go on this process? Because it's not an easy task to write a book, especially when it's autobiographical.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I spoke to you, and that was a good, 5 years ago now, I think 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was, I was in LA working on a television project for A&E at that time. But, Guy Evans reached out to me because I was a big fan of his book and his work, and we had done a couple speaking engagements together, one or two. I think on StarCast we did one, and really enjoyed him as a person, and admired him as a professional. And Guy called me and said, "Hey, would you consider writing another book?" And my first reaction was probably similar to the one I gave you: is I don't really have anything to talk about, which ironically was the first thing that crossed my mind when I was approached to do the first book. Is like, what am I going to write about? Fast forward, makes the New York Times bestseller list. So when Guy approached me and asked me if I'd be interested, I just said, "Guy, what are you thinking?" And Guy had been listening to the podcast and following me on social media. And he said, "Eric, there's a sense of positivity and gratitude in a lot of what you say and do, and look, the podcast is what the podcast is, right? I could get a little salty from time to time, but for the most part, I'm very grateful for it all." And that comes through. And Guy picked up on it. He goes, "What if we covered the period of time from your last book to the present day? So 2006, 7 to 2022. And again, I thought about it. I said, "Man, I don't know what would I talk about?" And I realized there's a fair amount to talk about and cover. But while I talk about the wrestling business, and it's kind of the backdrop from 2006 to 2022, it's really about what I've learned along the way, and how what I've learned has changed my perspective on my career and what I've accomplished and what it's taken me to get to that point. There are certain things that have happened to me, good, great, and not so great. But it's been that journey that's really helped me really appreciate my career a lot more than I probably ever did, even when I was right in the middle of the peak of it.
Do you jump into some of your TV experience as well in the book, or is it just mainly wrestling?
No, I talk a lot about, Bischoff Hervey Entertainment. Jason Hervey and I had we had a great run, Bischoff Hervey Entertainment from about 2003 till about 2014, good solid 11 years. We were making money hand over fist. We were cranking out TV shows. We had great relationships with a lot of studio executives and network executives. It was great until it wasn't. And the TV business has changed a lot. And, we saw the handwriting on the wall. Jason is still a friend. I don't see him as much or talk to him as much, obviously, because we're not working together, but we parted on good terms. We knew what we had to do. And I'm grateful that we got out when we did. Television business is kind of getting crushed right now.
Yeah. So. And it's interesting to see even the streamers are struggling. Unless you're Disney Plus, it seems like everywhere is struggling to grow and really diversify.
Well, and for independent producers like Jason and I were, we would create ideas, we would pitch the ideas, and we would produce the ideas and deliver them to the network. So we were kind of a turnkey company in that regard. But going back to 2003 and all the way up until about 2012, the profit margin for us was very, very good. But as we saw about 2013, 14, as things got more competitive and streaming started to rear its ugly head just a little bit, not a lot, but as that started to evolve and more importantly, I think vertical integration, the days of the independent production companies we could see was fast disappearing because they were all getting bought up and acquired by bigger companies like Warner Media, for example. And we just decided it was time to get out because you couldn't make any money doing it, or not enough to justify it. Let's put it that way.
Now, with this book, the title is Grateful, bischoffbook.com if you want to order it. I'm curious because I've been a long time listener of the podcast. I think the first time we talked, I was pretty upfront about how much I looked up to you as a fan, having missed the majority of your executive run in WCW. And so when your podcast launched, I was one of the first people to download it and become an avid follower of the podcast. And I can tell you, I'll tell you this, from launch to today, I believe it's a different Eric Bischoff in the respect of, I think the first couple, especially particularly with Conrad, you were kind of closed off the first handful of months of an episode, and now it's like you're open. We can hear the gratitude in your voice, like Guy Evans said. I feel like a lot of times you're giving unsolicited advice to people, but not in a bad way, where it's not like, old man shouting down at his younger people. It's there's times where I listen and I'll hear you say something that I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's a good way to think about this. Oh, that's a good thing to apply to my life that has nothing to do with professional wrestling. It's just a thing that you happen to say in between stories with Conrad. And so I'm curious, can you maybe tease the listeners a little bit of some of that wisdom that you might impart via the book?
I can't really, because it wasn't my goal to impart wisdom. I think if there was a goal, it was to show by example, I guess, because I go into some of the, Lori and I, we didn't hit rock bottom, but we bounced off of it a few times, and I've had to reinvent myself. At 62 years old, I woke up one day and went, holy shit, I'm starting all over again. And it was not easy in some respects, but remaining grateful along the way was one of the things that helped me stay positive, because I don't think you can be a positive person and have a positive outlook if you're not really fundamentally grateful for the opportunities and the things around you. So I just by example kind of took the reader through some of that. And I guess if I have a hope, while it's not trying to impart a lesson, my hope is that people will read this and go, huh, I guess things aren't so bad. Maybe I can change things if I want. Maybe I can change my attitude just a little bit and end up with a bigger, better outcome. That's what I hope, but I don't try to do it in a teachy, professorial kind of way, because I'm not that guy.
Yeah, I don't get that from you at all. And even the few times that you and I have been able to connect face to face, even when I ask you random questions about, hey, what would you do in this situation? It's never been a lecture or like you said, like a dissertation or anything. It's always just what I've gone through, and this is how I would handle it, and blah blah blah. And that that was the case. If you don't mind, I want to impart some gratitude of my own to you, because you have been, and I don't know if you realize this, but the very first time that you and I connected in person, I was like, hey, let me buy you a beer and let me just pick your brain. And at the time, I was a broke 20-something-year-old kid. And you said, absolutely, here's where I'm going to be between this time and this time. Come join me at the bar. And I sat there, picking your brain about wrestling and what would you do in this situation, and here's this idea and here's that idea, and I saw you drink 3 or 4 beers in that time frame at a hotel, and I'm like, that's like a $8 beer, and I'm counting it up and I'm like, oh, it's an expensive bar tab. I'm like, I have a little bit of room on my credit card, but
yeah, boutique LA in Beverly Hills, not a good place to go out and have a bunch of drinks.
Yeah, and without even thinking about it, you whipped out your credit card and you took care of the bill. And for me, that gave me an idea of how, and I've since heard from other people who have worked with you or know you that that's the type of person that you are. That if you know that the person on the other side of the table is not in as good of a situation you are, that you're the first person to whip out a credit card and take care of it. And I'm not telling people to go and buy you beer or offer to buy you beers and then hope that you're going to pay for it. What I'm saying is, I appreciated that. And it gave me a good mentality of how to deal with people who have later in life come to me and said, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee and chat with you for a few minutes and pick your brain on something? And, it really set a mentality. So I just wanted to say thank you for that first encounter. It set really good, positive vibe. And which is one of the reasons why when you announced that your book was coming out, I was one of the first to sign up and buy it. And why
Well, I appreciate that very much. And I appreciate you saying that. It makes me feel good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So one last question for you here, and I'll let you go because I've taken up enough of your time. What does the next handful of years look like for Eric Bischoff? I feel like between the podcast and the book, obviously you enjoy grilling, you enjoyed hunting. I don't know if you still enjoy it. I know your wife is a life coach and does a lot of great stuff there. Do you see yourself getting into another form of business, doing something on a scale of any sort, or are you just in a position where you feel like this is for the next handful of years, 83 weeks, the podcast and whatever appearances come out of it?
Well, I've got one project in particular that's in development as we speak that I'm excited about, but it'll be 2 years before it comes to fruition. It's a big project and some great people involved that have a lot more talent and experience than I do. So I'm learning from them and I look forward to that. But beyond that, and just doing the podcast, I still make appearances. I'm going to Toronto this weekend for an appearance, and I like doing that. It gets me out a little bit and makes me realize how much I appreciate where I live in Wyoming. But see, there's always a reason to be grateful. But
Yep.
I'm pretty content. I don't have anything that I feel a need to do. I'm kind of leaning into the things that I want to do and I enjoy doing. And right now I'm enjoying my life and I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing and I'm not looking for anything else. So we'll just see what happens. Who knows? My entire life, I didn't plan a career. I didn't plan anything. I just adapted and took advantage of opportunities as they came about. And I'm probably still doing that. It's just that I'm a little more determined to kind of stay where I'm at, not willing to move to the East Coast or move to the West Coast. If I can do it from home and have fun doing it, make a couple bucks, give me a call. Otherwise, I'm good just hiking with my dog, man.
Well, Eric, I appreciate the time. The book is called Grateful, bischoffbook.com. Obviously the podcast 83 weeks. You and I, we have a Monday morning war because our podcasts both come out on Mondays, but you're kicking my ass, man. So it's not much of a war.
Conrad's kicking your ass. I'm just along for the ride.
I appreciate your time. Go and download the podcast and get a copy of the book. It's going to be a good one. I shouldn't say that before I read the book, should I?
No, it's going to be good. You can say it.
It's going to be good.
You're safe.
Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.